Jake Martinez stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the massive building in front of him. The Galactic Combat Academy stretched across the horizon like a metal mountain. Its dark walls gleamed under the light of two suns. This was the most famous military school in the galaxy, and Jake could hardly believe he was here. The air on Kepler 442c felt thin in his lungs. Gravity was lighter than Earth, making each step feel like he might float away. Jake carried a small bag with his few belongings. He had trained for 3 years just to qualify for the entrance exam. Out of millions of humans who applied, only 3 had been accepted. Other beings walked past him toward the academy entrance. Jake had seen aliens before on video screens and in photos, but never in person. A group of tall, crystal-like creatures moved together. Their bodies caught the sunlight and threw rainbow colors across the ground. These were Zephyrians, he remembered from his studies. They were known for their armor-like skin that could stop bullets. Behind them came something that made Jake's breath catch. A massive creature walked on 2 legs, standing at least 9 feet tall. Its skin looked like gray stone, with bone-like plates covering its shoulders and arms. This was a Caraxian, one of the strongest species in the galaxy. The ground shook slightly with each step it took. "You must be Jake," said a voice beside him. Jake turned to see a woman about his age with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. She wore the same standard uniform he had been given. "I'm Lisa Ford, former Marine sniper from Earth." "Jake Martinez," he replied, shaking her hand. "Army Ranger." "And I'm Kevin Brooks," said another voice. A tall man with black hair approached them. "Navy SEAL. Looks like we're the only humans here." The 3 of them walked together toward the academy entrance. Around them, dozens of different alien species moved in groups. Jake saw beings that looked like they were made of liquid metal, others that seemed to float just above the ground, and creatures with 4 arms and eyes that glowed red in the dim light. "This is going to be interesting," Lisa said quietly. Inside the academy, a hologram appeared in the main hall. It showed the image of a being Jake didn't recognize. The creature had blue skin and 3 eyes. "Welcome, cadets, to the Galactic Combat Academy," the hologram said. Its voice echoed through the hall. "You represent the finest warriors from 12 different species. Over the next 6 months, you will be trained in combat techniques that have been perfected over thousands of years. Only the strongest will graduate." Jake felt his stomach twist with nervousness. Looking around at the other cadets, he realized how small humans were compared to most species. The shortest alien in the room was still taller than Kevin, who was 6 feet tall. "Your first class begins now," the hologram continued. "Report to Combat Training Hall 7. The humans followed the crowd through wide corridors. The walls were covered with pictures of famous graduates. Jake noticed that all of them were aliens. No human faces looked back at him from those walls. Combat Training Hall 7 was enormous. The floor was covered with soft mats and weapons hung on the walls. In the center of the room stood the largest Caraxian Jake had ever seen. The creature's bone plates were darker than the others, and scars covered its arms and face. When it spoke, its voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "I am Instructor Thakmor," the creature announced. "I have trained warriors for over 200 years. I have fought in 17 wars and killed enemies from 9 different species." Its small black eyes scanned the room. "Some of you will become great fighters. Others will quit or die trying." Thakmor's gaze stopped on the 3 humans. Jake felt like he was being examined by a predator deciding whether he was worth eating. "Today we will demonstrate proper combat technique," Thakmor said. "I need a volunteer to help me show basic defensive positions." No one moved. The room was completely silent. "You?" Thakmor pointed directly at Jake. "Human, come here." Jake's heart started racing. Lisa grabbed his arm. "Don't do it," she whispered. But Jake knew he had no choice. Refusing would be worse than whatever was about to happen. He walked to the center of the mat. Up close, Thakmor was even more frightening. The instructor towered over him, blocking out the light from above. Jake could smell something like metal and stone coming from the alien's skin. "This is how humans stand when they fight," Thakmor said to the class. Jake had barely taken a defensive position when he realized the instructor wasn't really teaching. This was something else. "Notice how weak their posture is," Thakmor continued. "Their bones are soft. Their muscles are small. They have no natural armor or weapons." Without warning, Thakmor's hand swung toward Jake. It moved faster than Jake could react. The back of the instructor's hand hit Jake in the chest like a sledgehammer. Jake heard 3 distinct cracking sounds as his ribs broke. The force of the blow sent him flying backward across the mat. Pain exploded through Jake's chest. He couldn't breathe. Every tiny movement felt like knives cutting into his lungs. He curled up on the floor trying to get air into his body. "As you can see," Thakmor said calmly, "humans are the weakest species ever admitted to this academy. They are barely suitable for supply work or basic maintenance." Around the room, alien cadets began to laugh. Some pointed at Jake writhing on the ground. Others made comments in languages Jake didn't understand, but their tone made it clear they were mocking him. "Their bones break from a simple demonstration blow," Thakmor continued. "In real combat, they would be dead in seconds." Jake tried to sit up, but the pain was too much. Lisa and Kevin rushed over to help him, but 2 larger alien cadets blocked their way. "Let this be a lesson," Thakmor said. "Strength determines survival. Weakness leads to death. Humans have no place among true warriors." Medical robots finally arrived and carefully lifted Jake onto a stretcher. As they carried him out of the training hall, he could still hear the laughter of the other cadets. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was Thakmor's scarred face, smiling with satisfaction. In the medical bay, machines worked to heal Jake's broken ribs. The pain slowly faded as alien technology repaired the damage to his body. But the humiliation burned inside him like fire. He had come here to prove that humans could fight alongside the galaxy's best warriors. Instead, he had been broken like a toy on his first day. As Jake lay on the medical bed, he made a promise to himself. Somehow, someway, he would make Thakmor pay for this humiliation. He didn't know how yet, but he would find a way. 3 weeks had passed since Jake's ribs were broken. The medical machines had fixed his bones perfectly, but the memory of that pain stayed with him. Every morning he woke up thinking about Thakmor's laugh and the way the other cadets had pointed at him while he lay helpless on the floor. Training continued every day, and it was brutal. The humans always finished last in every exercise. During strength tests, Jake could barely lift weights that the Caraxians picked up with one hand. In speed trials, the Veltari moved so fast they looked like blurs while Jake struggled to keep up. The Zephyrians could take hits that would kill a human and barely notice them. "Again!" Thakmor shouted during combat practice. "Humans, you are too slow, too weak, too stupid to learn." Jake dodged a practice sword swing from a Zephyrian cadet, but not fast enough. The blunted blade caught him in the shoulder and sent him spinning to the ground. Around the training hall, alien cadets laughed and made comments about human weakness. Lisa fared better in some exercises, especially those involving precise shooting. Her steady hands and good eyes served her well during target practice. But in hand-to-hand combat, she struggled just as much as Jake and Kevin. Kevin had incredible endurance for a human. He could run longer than most aliens expected, but his strength was still nothing compared to species that had evolved on high-gravity worlds or developed natural weapons over millions of years. Every few days, Thakmor would select one of the humans for another demonstration. Sometimes it was a throw that left them gasping for air. Other times it was a joint lock that made them scream. The instructor always had an excuse. He was teaching proper technique, showing what not to do, or explaining human limitations to the class. After one particularly bad session where Kevin had been knocked unconscious, the 3 humans sat together in their shared quarters. They were the only ones of their species, so they had been placed in the same room. Around them, alien cadets socialized in groups speaking languages that sounded like music, static, or grinding stone. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," Kevin said. A purple bruise covered half his face where Thakmor had accidentally struck him during a grappling demonstration. "We knew it would be hard," Lisa replied, but her voice lacked confidence. "We're the first humans here. Of course they don't respect us yet." Jake didn't say anything. He was studying a tablet computer, watching combat footage from the Academy's archives. For hours each night, he watched videos of different species fighting. He studied how they moved, how they attacked, how they defended themselves. "What are you doing?" Kevin asked. "Learning," Jake said simply. "Look at this." He showed them a video of a Caraxian fighting a Veltari. The Caraxian was bigger and stronger, but the Veltari was faster. "See how the Caraxian always attacks in straight lines? He uses his strength, but he's predictable." Lisa leaned closer to look. "And the Veltari? He's fast, but he gets tired quickly. Watch his breathing after 30 seconds of combat. He starts slowing down." Jake switched to another video. This one showed a Zephyrian in battle. The crystal-like being seemed nearly indestructible, but Jake had noticed something others missed. The Zephyrians have incredible armor, he explained, but look at their joints when they move quickly. See those tiny gaps between the crystal plates? That's where they regulate their body temperature. For just a split second, those areas are vulnerable. Over the following days, Jake shared his observations with Lisa and Kevin. They began to understand that every species had advantages, but they also had weaknesses. The problem was that humans were trying to fight like aliens instead of fighting like humans. We can't match their strength or speed, Jake said one evening, but we can do things they can't. Like what? Lisa asked. We adapt, we learn. We change our tactics based on our opponent. Jake pulled up more videos. Look at how these species fight. The Caraxians always use the same techniques their ancestors used 1,000 years ago. The Veltari have maybe 6 different attack patterns. The Zephyrians rely completely on their natural armor. Kevin started to understand. They're predictable. Exactly. They do the same things because those things work against most enemies. But what if we don't fight like most enemies? The 3 humans started training together in secret. Late at night, after the official training sessions were over, they would sneak back into empty training halls. Jake had figured out how to access the Academy's computer systems to create holographic opponents. Lisa worked on her shooting accuracy, but she also practiced moving unpredictably while aiming. Most species either stood still to shoot accurately or moved fast and shot wildly. Lisa learned to do both at the same time. Kevin focused on endurance fighting. Instead of trying to match alien strength, he practiced wearing opponents down. He learned to make small attacks that would tire bigger enemies, then strike when they were exhausted. Jake studied every fighting style in the Academy's database. He learned Caraxian power techniques, but modified them to work with human leverage instead of brute strength. He practiced Veltari speed moves, adjusted for human reflexes and joints. He even found ways to copy Zephyrian defensive positions using human flexibility. The key was combination. No alien species mixed techniques from other races. They stuck to their own traditional methods. But humans had no traditional methods in space combat. They could use everything. Their secret training sessions grew longer each night. They practiced against holographic opponents modeled after their alien classmates. Jake would fight a holographic Caraxian using modified Veltari speed techniques. Lisa would snipe at targets while using Zephyrian patience tactics. Kevin would grapple with opponents twice his size using leverage principles borrowed from multiple species. Slowly, they began to improve. Not in the ways the instructors measured. They were still weaker and slower than their alien classmates. But they were becoming more unpredictable, more adaptable, more creative in their approaches to combat problems. During regular training sessions, they started lasting longer in fights before being defeated. Their defensive positions improved. Their reaction times got better, not because they were getting faster, but because they were learning to predict attacks based on patterns they had studied. Other cadets began to notice the change. The easy victories against humans took more effort. The laughs came less frequently. Thakmar's demonstrations were still brutal, but the humans recovered more quickly and learned from each beating. One night, as they finished another secret training session, Lisa asked the question they were all thinking. How long before we're ready to show them what we've learned? Jake looked at his friends. 3 weeks ago, they had been broken and humiliated. Now they were becoming something new. Not stronger than aliens, not faster, but different in ways their opponents wouldn't expect. Soon, he said. Very soon. The announcement came during morning formation. All cadets stood in perfect rows while Academy Commander Veltar spoke through the communication system. The commander was a tall, blue-skinned being with 3 eyes and a voice that sounded like wind chimes. Today begins your midterm evaluation, the commander announced. Each cadet will face individual combat trials against randomly selected opponents from other species. These trials will determine who continues in the program and who returns home. Jake felt his heart start beating faster. Around him, alien cadets looked confident and excited. Many had been waiting for a chance to eliminate the weak humans from the Academy. Combat pairings have been determined by random selection, Commander Veltar continued. Results will be displayed on your personal tablets. Jake pulled out his tablet with shaking hands. Lisa and Kevin did the same beside him. The screen showed his opponent, Krixtal, a Zephyrian tactical specialist. Jake's stomach dropped. Zephyrians were known for their crystal armor that could stop almost any attack. Their tactical specialists were some of the smartest fighters in the galaxy. Lisa looked at her screen and went pale. "Zixara," she whispered. "Veltari Speedster." Kevin checked his tablet and grunted. "Gorthak. Caraxian Heavy Warrior." The three humans looked at each other. It was as if the computer had selected the worst possible opponents for each of them. Around the training hall, alien cadets were checking their own matchups and grinning when they saw they would face humans. "Combat trials begin in 1 hour," Commander Veltar announced. "Prepare yourselves." The first match was Lisa versus Zixara. The trial took place in a simulated urban battlefield with tall buildings and narrow streets. Both fighters carried sniper rifles and had to hunt each other through the maze-like environment. Jake and Kevin watched through the observation deck as Lisa took position on a rooftop. Zixara was somewhere in the maze below, moving too fast for the cameras to track clearly. Veltari could run along walls and leap between buildings like they were weightless. "She's got no chance," muttered a Caraxian cadet nearby. "Veltari are the best snipers in the galaxy. They can shoot while moving at full speed." For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Lisa remained perfectly still on her rooftop while Zixara moved through the battlefield below. Occasionally, a blur would appear between buildings, but no shots were fired. Then Jake saw what Lisa was doing. She wasn't trying to match Zixara's speed or reaction time. Instead, she was studying movement patterns. Every species had habits, even the unpredictable Veltari. Zixara appeared again, running along a wall 3 buildings away. Lisa didn't shoot. She waited. The Veltari disappeared and reappeared on a different building. Still, Lisa held her fire. "What is she doing?" Kevin whispered. "Learning," Jake replied. On the 6th appearance, Lisa finally fired. But she didn't shoot at where Zixara was, she shot at where the Veltari was going to be. Her bullet caught Zixara mid-leap between 2 buildings. The Veltari fell to the ground, eliminated. Silence filled the observation deck. No one had expected the human to win, especially not against one of the Academy's top snipers. Kevin's match was next. He faced Gorthak in a circular arena with various obstacles and weapons scattered around. The Caraxian was even bigger than Thakmor, with bone plates that covered most of his body like natural armor. The match started with Gorthak charging straight at Kevin like a living tank. Kevin didn't try to block or match the charge. Instead, he dove aside and kept moving. He grabbed a practice sword from the ground and struck at the Caraxian's back, but the blade bounced off harmlessly. "Run all you want, weak human," Gorthak roared. "You cannot hurt me." But Kevin wasn't trying to hurt his opponent yet. He was making Gorthak chase him around the arena, forcing the heavy Caraxian to burn energy with each massive charge. Jake watched from above and recognized the strategy. It was something they had practiced during their secret training sessions. After 5 minutes of constant movement, Gorthak was breathing hard. His charges were slower, his reflexes dulled by fatigue. That's when Kevin changed tactics. He stopped running and started fighting, but not the way anyone expected. Instead of powerful attacks that would bounce off Caraxian armor, Kevin made dozens of small, quick strikes. Each hit did almost no damage, but they added up. More importantly, they forced Gorthak to defend constantly, burning even more energy. The Caraxian grew frustrated and made a desperate charge. Kevin sidestepped and struck with perfect timing at the back of Gorthak's knee, the one spot where the bone plates didn't overlap completely. The giant alien crashed to the ground, too exhausted to get back up. Another impossible victory for the humans. Jake's turn came last. He faced Krixtal in a standard combat arena with no weapons except their natural abilities. The Zephyrian stood calmly in the center of the ring, crystal armor gleaming under the lights. He looked like a living statue made of precious gems. "You may begin when ready, human," Krixtal said. His voice sounded like glass bells ringing. "I will try to make this quick and painless." Jake circled slowly around his opponent. He had studied Zephyrian fighting techniques for weeks, looking for any weakness in their seemingly perfect defense. Their crystal armor could stop bullets, absorb energy weapons, and deflect most physical attacks. But Jake had found something others missed. He started with quick, probing attacks that Krixtal easily blocked or absorbed. The Zephyrian barely moved, confident in his natural defenses. Around the arena, alien spectators began to laugh as Jake's strikes had no visible effect. "Is this the best humanity can offer?" called out a Veltari cadet. Jake ignored the taunts and kept attacking, but he was watching carefully for something specific. After each exchange, Krixtal's crystal armor would dim slightly for just a fraction of a second. It was barely noticeable, but Jake had seen it in the training videos. Zephyrians needed to regulate their body temperature. When they absorbed too much energy from attacks, their armor had to release excess heat through tiny gaps between the crystal plates. During those brief moments, they were vulnerable. Jake increased his attack rate, forcing Krixtal to absorb more and more energy. The Zephyrian's armor grew brighter and brighter as it stored the kinetic force from Jake's strikes. "You are only making me stronger," Krixtal said confidently. But Jake was counting seconds in his head. The armor would have to release energy soon, or Krixtal would overheat. There, he saw it. A tiny gap appeared between chest plates as excess heat escaped. Jake's final strike was perfectly timed. His fist shot through the gap just as it opened, hitting Krixtal's actual body instead of his armor. The Zephyrian gasped in surprise and pain, staggering backward. Before his opponent could recover, Jake pressed his advantage. He had memorized the timing now. Every few seconds, another gap would appear somewhere on Krixtal's body. Jake struck with surgical precision, hitting only during the brief moments of vulnerability. Krixtal fell to his knees, then collapsed completely. His crystal armor flickered and went dark. The arena was completely silent. 3 humans had just defeated opponents from 3 different species, each victory coming against impossible odds. Thakmor stood at the edge of the arena, his scarred face twisted with rage and confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were weak. They were jokes. They were supposed to fail and be eliminated from the program, but instead they had won. As Jake helped Krixtal to his feet, the Zephyrian looked at him with something like respect. "How did you know about our heat regulation?" "I studied," Jake replied simply. "I learned." The 3 humans walked back to their quarters together, ignoring the stares and whispers of alien cadets. For the first time since arriving at the academy, they held their heads high. They had proven that humans could fight with the galaxy's best. They had shown that strength wasn't everything, that speed wasn't everything, that natural advantages could be overcome through intelligence and adaptation. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. Thakmor's hatred would only grow stronger now. The real challenges were still ahead. The days following the midterm trials were different. Alien cadets no longer pointed and laughed when the humans entered a room. Instead, they watched with wary eyes and whispered among themselves. The easy targets were gone, replaced by something unexpected and dangerous. Jake noticed the change immediately. During combat practice, opponents who once attacked recklessly now approached with caution. The Veltari stopped relying purely on speed. The Caraxians began using more defensive positions. Even the confident Zephyrians started varying their tactics instead of depending entirely on their armor. But if the other cadets had gained respect for the humans, Instructor Thakmor had only grown more hostile. His demonstrations became more frequent and more brutal. He seemed determined to prove that the human victories were just luck. "You think you are warriors now?" Thakmor snarled during one particularly vicious training session. He had just thrown Kevin across the room hard enough to crack the wall. "You won a few fights against younglings. That means nothing." Jake helped Kevin to his feet while Lisa stood ready to intervene if needed. They had developed a system of protecting each other, but it only made Thakmor angrier. "In real combat," the instructor continued, his voice like grinding stone, "experience matters more than tricks. Strength matters more than cleverness. Age matters more than youth." 3 more weeks passed. The humans continued to improve, but so did their opponents. The other cadets learned to adapt to human unpredictability. Fights became closer, victories harder to achieve. Jake began to worry that their advantage was temporary, that eventually the aliens would figure out how to counter human tactics. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Commander Veltar appeared via hologram in the main training hall. All cadets stood at attention as the 3-eyed being spoke. "Cadets, we have reached a unique point in Academy history," the commander said. "For the first time, we have an instructor who wishes to issue the ultimate challenge." A murmur went through the assembled students. Jake had never heard of an ultimate challenge before. Instructor Thakmor has requested permission to offer immediate graduation with full honors to any cadet who can defeat him in single combat, Commander Veltar explained. This challenge has never been issued before in the Academy's 2,000-year history. Jake felt his blood run cold. He looked at Thakmor, who stood beside the hologram projector with his arms crossed. The massive Caraxian's scarred face showed complete confidence. The challenge is open to all cadets, the commander continued. Any volunteer who defeats Instructor Thakmor will graduate immediately with the highest honors possible. Any volunteer who fails, the commander paused, will be eliminated from the program permanently. The training hall fell silent. Every cadet understood what this meant. Thakmor had trained warriors for over 200 years. He had fought in real wars, killed enemies from multiple species, and never lost a single combat in all his time as an instructor. This was meant to be the end of the human experiment. Thakmor was offering them a choice: accept that they didn't belong here and continue as they were, or challenge him and be destroyed. I will take volunteers starting tomorrow, Thakmor announced. His small black eyes found the three humans in the crowd. Anyone who thinks they are ready to face a true warrior may step forward. That evening, the humans sat in their quarters discussing the challenge. Outside their window, the two suns of Kepler 442c were setting, casting long shadows across the Academy grounds. It's a trap, Lisa said bluntly. He wants us to volunteer so he can eliminate us legally. Maybe, Kevin agreed. But what if it's not? What if this is our chance to prove ourselves once and for all? Jake stared out the window, thinking. In his mind, he replayed every interaction with Thakmor, every brutal demonstration, every humiliating comment, every broken bone and bruised ego. The instructor represented everything that said humans didn't belong among the galaxy's warriors. I'm gonna do it, Jake said quietly. Jake, no. Lisa grabbed his arm. You saw what he did to you on the first day. That was just a casual blow. In real combat, he'll kill you. Maybe, Jake replied. But I've learned a lot since that first day. We all have. Over the next 2 days, 5 alien cadets volunteered for the challenge. Jake watched each attempt from the observation deck with growing dread. The first challenger was Morgax, a Caraxian almost as large as Thakmor himself. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. Thakmor used techniques Jake had never seen before, movements that seemed to flow like water despite his massive size. Morgax was carried away unconscious. The second challenger was a Veltari speedster named Kixaran. She was faster than anyone Jake had ever seen, moving like lightning around the arena. But Thakmor somehow anticipated every move, countering attacks that seemed to come from impossible angles. Kixaran fell after 2 minutes and didn't get back up. The third challenger was a Zephyrian tactical genius called Hexara. He tried to fight defensively, using his crystal armor to absorb Thakmor's attacks while looking for openings. But the instructor's experience showed. He found weaknesses in Zephyrian defenses that Jake hadn't even known existed. Hexara lasted 4 minutes before his armor cracked and he surrendered. The fourth challenger was from a species Jake didn't recognize, a being with 6 arms who could attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Thakmor defeated him in under a minute. The fifth challenger was a hybrid warrior with genetic modifications from 3 different species. He had enhanced strength, speed, and armor. Thakmor toyed with him for 5 minutes before ending the fight with a single devastating blow. You see? Thakmor announced to the assembled cadets after his 5th victory. This is what real combat looks like. These were your best fighters and they were children compared to a true warrior. His gaze found Jake in the crowd. Are there any other volunteers? Perhaps someone thinks they can succeed where these 5 failed. The challenge hung in the air like a physical presence. Every cadet in the room knew what Thakmor was really asking. He wanted the humans to volunteer. He wanted to finish what he had started on their first day. Jake stood up slowly. Around him, cadets began to whisper. Lisa reached for his arm again, but he gently moved away from her. I volunteer, Jake said clearly. The whispers stopped. The training hall became so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Thakmor's scarred face split into a terrible grin. Excellent, the instructor rumbled. Finally, we can end this charade. Tomorrow morning, human. The entire academy will watch as you learn your place. Jake nodded and sat back down. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time in months, he felt something like anticipation. Tomorrow, he would face the being who had broken his ribs and his pride on his first day at the academy. Tomorrow, he would discover if everything he had learned was enough to overcome 200 years of experience and natural Caraxian superiority. Tomorrow, he would either prove that humans belonged among the galaxy's warriors, or he would be eliminated trying. As Jake lay in bed that night, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. From the broken, humiliated cadet who had been carried away on a stretcher to someone willing to face the Academy's most dangerous instructor. He thought about all the techniques he had learned, all the fighting styles he had studied, all the weaknesses he had discovered in species that were supposed to be superior to humans in every way. He thought about Lisa's precision, Kevin's endurance, and his own ability to adapt and combine different approaches into something new. Most of all, he thought about the promise he had made to himself in the medical bay after Thakmor shattered his ribs. Somehow, some way, he would make the instructor pay for that humiliation. Tomorrow he would find out if he was ready to keep that promise. The entire academy gathered to watch the fight. Every cadet, instructor, and staff member crowded into the main combat arena. They came expecting to see the final humiliation of the human program, the end of an experiment that should never have begun. Jake stood at one end of the arena, wearing simple training clothes and no armor. Across from him, Thakmor waited in full ceremonial combat gear. The instructor's bone plates gleamed under the bright lights and fresh scars covered his massive arms. He looked like death itself given physical form. Commander Veltar appeared via hologram above the arena. "This is a formal challenge combat," the three-eyed being announced. "Standard rules apply. The fight continues until one combatant yields, becomes unconscious, or..." The commander paused. "Dies." Jake felt his mouth go dry. This wasn't a training exercise. This was real combat with real consequences. "Combatants may begin when ready," Commander Veltar said. Then the hologram disappeared. Thakmor cracked his knuckles, producing sounds like breaking rocks. "Any last words, human?" Jake said nothing. He moved into a fighting stance that looked familiar but somehow different. The alien spectators recognized elements from multiple species' fighting styles, but combined in ways they had never seen before. The fight began with Thakmor doing exactly what Jake expected. The massive Caraxian charged straight forward, using his size and strength to try to end the fight quickly. It was the same attack that had shattered Jake's ribs months ago, but Jake was no longer the same fighter. He flowed to the side like water, using a movement borrowed from Veltari speed techniques but modified for human joints and reflexes. Thakmor's charge missed by inches. The instructor spun around faster than something his size should have been able to move. His backhand swing could have crushed Jake's skull, but Jake wasn't there. He had dropped low and rolled away, using a defensive technique adapted from Zephyrian combat doctrine. "Stop running and fight." Thakmor roared. Jake didn't respond. He continued to move around the arena, always staying just out of reach. The crowd began to boo, thinking the human was simply avoiding combat. They didn't understand what Jake was really doing. He was learning. Every species had patterns, habits burned into them by millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of tradition. Caraxians were no different. They were powerful and experienced, but they were also predictable. Thakmor attacked again, this time with a series of strikes designed to corner Jake against the arena wall. Each blow could have killed a human instantly, but Jake slipped between them like smoke. He used Veltari evasion tactics combined with human flexibility, creating movement patterns that Thakmor had never encountered before. The instructor's frustration grew with each missed attack. He began to strike harder, faster, burning energy to try to catch the elusive human. Jake continued to dance away, studying every technique, every combination, every tell that revealed what Thakmor would do next. 5 minutes passed. The crowd grew restless. This wasn't the quick, brutal victory they had expected. The human was lasting longer than any of the previous challengers, but he wasn't fighting back. Then everything changed. Jake saw his opening when Thakmor overextended on a particularly powerful punch. The instructor's balance shifted for just a moment, and Jake struck for the first time. His attack was precise, targeted at a gap between bone plates that he had identified weeks ago during his studies. The blow barely registered to Thakmor, but Jake wasn't trying to win with a single strike. He was beginning a campaign of attrition, using tactics learned from a dozen different species but combined in ways that had never been tried before. Jake began to fight like no one the galaxy had ever seen. He struck with Caraxian power principles applied through human leverage instead of brute strength. He moved with Veltari speed techniques modified for human endurance instead of burst energy. He defended with Zephyrian patience, tactics adjusted for human flexibility instead of natural armor. Most importantly, he kept changing. Every few seconds, Jake switched fighting styles, adapting his approach based on how Thakmor responded. When the instructor adjusted to counter one technique, Jake was already using something completely different. Thakmor had trained for over 200 years, but all his experience was built on fighting predictable opponents. Each species used their own traditional methods. Coraxians fought like Coraxians. Veltari fought like Veltari. Zephyrians fought like Zephyrians. But humans had no traditional method. They could fight like anyone or like everyone at once. The crowd fell silent as they watched something unprecedented. Jake wasn't stronger than Thakmor, wasn't faster, wasn't tougher. But he was unpredictable in ways the instructor couldn't counter. 10 minutes passed. 15, 20. Thakmor was breathing hard now, his attacks coming slower and with less precision. Jake had barely been touched, but the instructor's body showed dozens of small wounds where precise human strikes had found gaps in his defenses. Impossible, Thakmor gasped. No one has ever lasted this long. Jake didn't waste breath on words. He pressed his advantage, increasing the pace of his attacks. Each strike was carefully placed, targeting nerve clusters and joint connections that he had identified through weeks of study. None of the blows were powerful enough to cause serious damage individually, but together they were overwhelming Thakmor's ability to defend. The instructor tried to use his ultimate technique, a devastating combination attack that had ended countless battles throughout his career, but Jake had seen it coming. He had studied recordings of Thakmor's previous victories, analyzed the setup and timing of this exact sequence. Jake flowed around the attack like he had been born to counter it, then struck back with a combination of his own. It was a technique that had never existed before, drawn from the fighting styles of 6 different species but perfectly adapted for human anatomy and timing. Thakmor staggered backward, his eyes wide with shock. A thin line of blood ran down his face where Jake's strike had found its mark. "How?" the instructor whispered. "I learned," Jake replied simply. The end came quickly after that. Thakmor, exhausted and confused by an opponent unlike anything in his experience, made a desperate charge. Jake sidestepped and countered with perfect precision, striking at the base of the instructor's skull with a technique that would have been impossible for any other species to perform. Thakmor collapsed to the arena floor and did not get back up. Silence filled the massive space. Thousands of alien beings stared in disbelief at the unconscious form of their most feared instructor. The human who had been broken and humiliated on his first day now stood over the being who had seemed invincible. Jake walked over to the unconscious Thakmor and carefully picked up the ceremonial trophy that marked victory in challenge combat. It was a replica of a Coraxian skull crest, carved from black stone and polished to a mirror shine. He held it above his head as the crowd finally found their voices. The cheers that erupted were not mocking or reluctant. They were genuine expressions of respect for a warrior who had achieved the impossible. Commander Veltar's hologram reappeared. By ancient law and tradition, Jake Martinez of Earth has won the ultimate challenge. He graduates immediately with the highest honors in Academy history. Jake looked up at the observation deck where Lisa and Kevin watched with tears in their eyes. He had done more than win a fight. He had proven that humans belonged among the galaxy's warriors, not despite their limitations, but because of their ability to overcome them. 2 days later, as Jake prepared to leave the academy, Thakmor appeared at his quarters. The massive Coraxian moved slowly, still recovering from their battle. His scarred face showed something Jake had never seen there before. Respect. "I have trained warriors for over 2 centuries. Thakmor said quietly. "I have fought enemies from 9 different species, but I have never faced an opponent like you." Jake nodded politely, unsure what to say. "Your victory was not luck," the instructor continued. "It was adaptation, evolution. You became something new during our fight, something that had never existed before." Thakmor extended his massive hand. "I would be honored to learn these human techniques if you would teach them." Jake stared at the offered hand for a moment. This was the same being who had shattered his ribs and called humans weak and worthless. But it was also a warrior who had dedicated his life to combat and recognized excellence when he saw it. Jake shook the offered hand. "I'd be honored to teach you," As Jake left the academy with his graduation honors, he carried more than just a certificate and trophy. He carried the knowledge that humanity had found its place among the stars not through superior strength or speed, but through the one thing that made them uniquely human, the ability to adapt, learn, and become more than the sum of their parts. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again.